The air in the lawyer's office felt too still, like even the walls were waiting to exhale. Mom's portrait hung behind Victor Alden's desk, her smile kind, knowing, and suddenly unbearable to look at. I sat between my siblings, Naomi and Eli. Both of them checking their phones like this was just another Tuesday. But it wasn't. Mom was gone, and we were here to hear her final words. Victor adjusted his silver-rimmed glasses and cleared his throat. Margaret Kessler's final instructions. He began, his voice smooth as silk. All assets are to be divided equally between her 3 children. With one exception. He reached under the desk and placed 7 identical wooden boxes on the table, each carved with a number. My eyes were drawn immediately to the 7th one. There was something different about it, something that made my stomach twist. Box 7 is not to be opened. Victor read from the document. Its contents are to remain sealed indefinitely. Naomi scoffed beside me. Seriously. Mom was losing it at the end. What's in there, her jewelry? Or another one of her moral lessons? I wanted to defend her, but grief sat like a stone in my throat. Mom never did anything without reason. Every action, every word had purpose. Victor cleared his throat again. Louder this time. Legally, this clause is void. I'm obligated to open it, no. I said quietly, finding my voice. If Mother said not to, then we should respect that. But he was already sliding a letter opener under the lid before I could finish. The hinges gave a faint whine, like something ancient waking up. My heart hammered against my ribs as he lifted the lid. Inside lay a single envelope, cream-colored and sealed with red wax. He broke the seal and read aloud. If this box is opened before both my children reconcile, truth will come spilling out. Then his face drained of all color. His hands started trembling slightly as he stared into the box. What truth? Naomi demanded. Leaning forward, Victor didn't answer. He just stared at what lay beneath the envelope. A photograph, old, torn at the edges. Faded with time, he lifted it carefully. And I saw my father's face looking back at me. But he wasn't with my mother. He was holding a newborn in a hospital room. And the woman beside him wasn't Mom. She was younger, dark-haired, smiling proudly at the camera. The baby was wrapped in a pink blanket with a name tag visible. Naomi. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second feeling like an eternity. I reached for the photograph with trembling hands. It showed my father holding a newborn in what looked like a hospital delivery room. The photo was labeled in faded ink, Naomi, 1987, but my mother wasn't in the picture. Another woman was, younger with dark hair and bright eyes, smiling as if she'd just won the lottery. That's not Mom, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Naomi's face had gone pale. You're saying I'm not, she started, her voice cracking. It could be nothing. Victor interrupted too quickly. His composure was cracking. I could see sweat forming on his forehead. He folded the photograph and tried to tuck it under a document. But I was faster. I snatched it back. Don't, I said firmly. His eyes met mine. And I saw something there, fear. Guilt, maybe both. We shouldn't jump to conclusions, he said, adjusting his glasses nervously. Margaret was eccentric near the end. This could be a misunderstanding. I knew manipulation when I heard it. My mother's eyes, forever sharp, had left that box as a warning, and Victor was trying to bury it before we could understand why. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The photograph sat on my nightstand, taunting me with questions. I got up and went through Mom's old study, the room she'd kept locked for the last year of her life. Dad had died when I was 12, and she'd never been the same after. The study still smelled like her lavender perfume and old paper. Hidden in her desk drawer was another box, smaller than the others, box number 6. Inside was a key and a note written in her delicate cursive handwriting. Lorna, when he lies, look for the scar. I read it 3 times, trying to make sense of it. When who lies, look for what scar? Then I remembered Victor's nervous habit. During the reading, he'd kept touching his chin, covering something, a small scar, barely visible, just under his jaw. I'd noticed it before but never thought anything of it. Now, Mom's words made my blood run cold. She'd known something about Victor, something important enough to leave a cryptic warning. I grabbed my phone and called Naomi. No answer, then Eli voicemail. I was alone with this secret. At least for tonight, I didn't sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photograph in my mother's handwriting. The next morning, I saw Victor again at the follow-up meeting. He'd called us in to discuss the estate distribution. But something felt wrong. He pretended everything was normal, reading legal jargon in his smooth voice. Avoiding my eyes, Naomi sat beside him. Pale and quiet, Eli was late. As usual, Lorna, Victor said gently. Your mother's estate is complex. We'll handle this carefully. Complex? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Or compromised, he smiled, but it was too fast. Too polished, that was when I saw it clearly. The thin white scar under his jaw, pulsing slightly as he swallowed. He was nervous, I leaned forward. My eyes locked on his. Victor, did you know my father before he married my mother? His eyes flickered, just for a second. But I caught it, that's irrelevant. He said, then why are you in that photograph? The room went completely still. Naomi turned toward me sharply. Her eyes wide, what did you say? He was standing next to our father. Naomi, in the maternity ward. In the same room where you were born. Victor's hand dropped from his chin. He looked like a man who'd just been caught in a lie he'd been telling for decades. You're mistaken, he said quietly. But his voice trembled. You should stop digging, Lorna, for your own good. Before I could respond, a courier arrived at that exact moment. He was holding a sealed envelope, thick and official-looking, delivery for Lorna Kessler. He said. Victor stood abruptly. That's not part of the estate. It's marked urgent, the courier replied. Handing it to me, the envelope was addressed in my mother's handwriting. To Lorna from M. Kessler. Do not deliver until after my death. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside was a single page, written in her familiar script. My dearest Lorna, it began. If you're reading this, someone has already broken my instruction. Do not trust the man with the scar. He stole something from your father. And from you, my heart raced. There was a name scribbled at the bottom. Hawthorne Bank Deposit Number 17B. When I looked up, Victor was pale. His eyes darted between me and the letter. What's in Deposit 17B? I asked slowly. Old paperwork. He stammered, nothing important. Your mother was confused in her final days. Naomi crossed her arms. Then we'll see it. If it's nothing important, you won't mind. Victor stood, trying to keep his composure. But I could see his jaw tightening. That's not advisable. Some things are best left buried. Lorna, my mother didn't think so. I said, standing to face him. And you're standing on her grave, Victor. That night, someone broke into my house. I'd gone to bed early, exhausted from the day's revelations. Around 2 in the morning, I heard the sound of breaking glass downstairs. My heart jumped into my throat. I grabbed my phone and crept to the bedroom door. The house smelled like rain and fear. I could hear footsteps moving through my study. Drawers being opened, papers rustling. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers. Then hid in my closet. The police arrived within minutes. But by then, the intruder was gone. They didn't steal my laptop or jewelry or cash. They took box number 6, the one with Mom's note and the key. I called Eli as soon as the police left. No answer, then Naomi, straight to voicemail. Something in my gut twisted. This wasn't random. It was a message, and the message was clear: stop digging. But that had never been my way. Mom raised me to question everything, to never accept lies just because they were convenient. The next morning, I drove to Hawthorne Bank. My hands were still shaking from the break-in. But I had to know. The clerk was a young woman with kind eyes. She hesitated when I showed her the deposit number. But eventually, she led me to a private room. Inside Deposit 17B was a single document, a birth certificate. I stared at the paper for a full minute before the words made sense. Issued July 15, 1987. Mother, Margaret Kessler. Father, Victor Alden. The world tilted. My vision blurred. That meant Victor wasn't just our lawyer. He was Naomi's biological father. And he'd been hiding it for 36 years. My mind raced through every interaction we'd ever had with him. He'd been Mom's lawyer since before I was born. He'd been at every family gathering, every holiday dinner. He'd been there when Dad died. And he'd known this secret the entire time. I took a photo of the certificate with my phone and left the bank in a daze. As I stepped outside, I saw him. Victor was waiting by my car, umbrella in hand, calm as ever. Lorna, he said softly, we need to talk. Alone, my first instinct was to run. But I forced myself to stay. If I ran now, I'd never get the truth. Start talking, I said. He looked around nervously, then handed me a folded note. Not here, tomorrow, the old observatory. Come alone. Before I could respond, He walked away, disappearing into the morning crowd. I stood there, clutching the note. My heart pounding. Something told me this wasn't just a meeting, it was a test. The next morning, I drove to the old observatory on the outskirts of town. It had been abandoned for years, a relic from when the city had money for science and stars. As I pulled up, I saw a single car waiting. Not Victor's sleek sedan, Naomi's beat-up Honda. She was sitting on the hood, smoking a cigarette, something she hadn't done in years. Not since college. He told me to meet him too. She said without looking at me. Looks like he's playing us both. We walked inside together. The air smelled of dust and old electricity. A file sat on the central table, labeled Project Fennel. Inside were old contracts, signed by my mother, my father. And Victor, what is this? Naomi asked, flipping through pages. It's the company Dad built. I whispered, my eyes scanning the documents. But Mom's name is missing from the ownership papers. Naomi frowned, her cigarette forgotten. You're saying he erased her ownership? Before I could answer, headlights flared outside. A figure approached slowly, Victor. But instead of coming inside, he tossed something through the doorway. A small envelope scorched at the edges. On the back, written in my mother's handwriting, were the words, if you're reading this. The lawyer lied again. The envelope was warm to the touch. When I opened it, ash fell out. Only half the letter remained, the rest burned away. The surviving half of the letter read, he took more than money. Lorna, he took my choice, what he made me sign. I never forgave myself for it. Naomi's voice trembled. She's saying he forced her. Or blackmailed her, maybe both. I murmured, my hands shaking. Victor stood in the doorway now, rain slicking his gray hair. His face was tired, older than I'd ever seen him. Enough, he said quietly. You don't understand what your mother did. Then tell me, I demanded, stepping toward him. She wasn't the victim, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She was protecting one of you. Before I could respond, Naomi stormed past me, her face red with anger. You're a liar. You've been lying to us our whole lives. But Victor's eyes weren't on her. They were on me. Ask yourself. Lorna, he said slowly, why box 7 had your handwriting on the bottom? My blood went cold after he left. I turned the box over with trembling hands. Faded beneath the wood grain, carved in tiny letters were the words, forgive me. Lorna, my mother's apology, carved by her own hand. And I had no idea what for, that night. I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing those words, kept hearing Victor's voice. What had my mother done that required my forgiveness? I went through the attic the next day, searching through Mom's old ledgers and diaries. Most were mundane, grocery lists, daily notes, reminders about doctor appointments. Until one entry caught my eye. December 9th, 1987. If anything happens, the ledger goes to Lorna. It will prove everything Victor did. I tore through every box in that attic until I found it. A small green journal wrapped in faded lace. Inside were handwritten accounts, transactions, wire transfers, offshore accounts, and a name that made my blood freeze. Eli Kessler, my brother, payments made in his name, dating back to 1989, long before he was even old enough to have a bank account. The final entry read, if Victor finds this before Lorna does, he'll use Eli the same way he used me. I dropped the book, my hands numb. The ink was smudged in places, but 2 words stood out, circled multiple times, Heirs Clause. At that moment, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop reading, he's already with Eli. I grabbed my keys and ran. I drove straight to Eli's apartment across town. His lights were on, but the front door was wide open. My stomach dropped. Inside, Victor was sitting calmly on the couch. Eli stood behind him, his eyes glazed. Distant, you shouldn't have come. Victor said without looking at me. You shouldn't have touched my brother. I shot back, my voice shaking with anger. Eli stepped forward slightly. Lorna, it's fine, he explained everything. You've got it all wrong. What did he explain? I demanded, looking between them. Victor held up one of the ledgers I'd just found. Your mother wasn't forced, Lorna. She chose to give me half the estate. For Eli's future, you expect me to believe that? I asked. I expect you to read the last page before judging. He said calmly, handing me the ledger. The final line was in different ink, shakier handwriting than the rest. Lorna must never know what I gave him. I looked up at Victor, my throat tight. What did she give you? He smiled faintly. But there was no joy in it, not money. A promise, before I could ask more. My phone buzzed again. A notification from the bank. Your mother's vault access has been triggered by a secondary authorization. Box 7 has been opened. I stared at the screen in disbelief. That's impossible, I have the only key. Victor stood slowly, apparently not. The next morning, I arrived at the bank. The clerk's face was pale when she saw me. Mrs. Kessler, Box 7 was accessed at 8:04 this morning. With your authorization code. That's impossible, I said. I never gave it. The man slid me the signature sheet. My blood went cold, it was my signature. But not in my handwriting, someone had forged it. He handed me the surveillance photo. The woman in the image wore my scarf. My coat walked like me, but it wasn't me. Her face was turned away from the camera. Obscured perfectly, whoever this was. The clerk whispered, they took something small. Like an envelope, I asked to see the vault. Inside the compartment where Box 7 had been, something new had been placed. A single Polaroid photograph of my mother and Victor. Taken decades ago, they were young. Smiling, standing close together. On the back was a caption written in faded ink. She loved me enough to lie for me. I turned the photo over again, studying it more carefully. In the reflection of a glass window behind them, barely visible, was another figure. Watching them, the face was blurry. But I recognized the jacket. It was one my father used to wear. No, wait, I looked closer. It wasn't my father. It was Eli, but that was impossible. This photo was taken in 1986. Eli wasn't born until 1991. I drove straight to Eli's house again. This time unannounced. He looked terrified before I even spoke. Lorna, please, it's not what you think. Then tell me what it is, I said, pushing past him into the apartment. He handed me a small flash drive with shaking hands. Mom recorded everything, but Victor made her promise never to release it. And you went along with that? I asked, my voice rising. He said she killed Dad. Eli whispered, his eyes brimming with tears. I froze. What? He nodded, swallowing hard. He showed me proof, the coroner's letter. The pills she was taking. He said she was unstable. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop right there in his living room. My mother's voice came through the speakers, soft and shaking. If you're hearing this, Victor's already told his version. The truth is, I tried to save your father. Not end him. She paused, her breath catching audibly. Box 7 holds the only copy of the deal Victor forced me to sign. The one that gave him control of your father's estate. Don't let him burn it again. I looked at Eli, my mind reeling. Again, what does she mean again? He stared down at his hands. He already did once. Back in 1998, there was a fire at the law firm. Only one file was destroyed. The audio glitched suddenly. Then a man's voice broke in. Deep and threatening. If you open that box again, Lorna, you'll lose your brother too. The recording ended. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then my phone rang. Victor, you've gone too far. He said, meet me where your mother and I first met. Tomorrow, 9 p.m. I recognized the place immediately. The Cliffside Chapel outside Belhaven. Mom had mentioned it once years ago. When I'd asked how she met Dad, she'd said Victor had introduced them at a wedding there. When I arrived the next evening, Victor stood under the chapel's wooden cross, holding a thick envelope. The wind whipped around us, carrying the smell of rain. Your mother's confession. He said, his voice calm. She wrote 2 versions. You can choose which one the world sees. Why me? I asked, my voice barely steady. Because you were always the moral one. And morality is easy to manipulate. I stayed silent as thunder rolled overhead. He stepped closer, his face illuminated by lightning. I didn't kill your father, Lorna. Your mother covered for someone else. I whispered, who? Your brother. He said slowly, ask him why your father's car went off that bridge. He handed me the envelope and walked away into the darkness. My hands trembled as I opened it later that night. But it wasn't a letter inside. It was a birth certificate with Eli's name, and Victor listed as his father. My world tilted completely. Eli wasn't just my brother. He was Victor's son. Everything made sense now. The protection, the manipulation, the secrets. My mother had been protecting Eli's identity. Even from me, especially from me. I sat in silence for hours, reading and rereading the document. So that was the promise my mother made. To protect Eli's identity, to keep Victor's secret, to ensure his legitimacy in our family. When I confronted Eli the next morning, he broke down completely. I didn't know. Lorna, he told me last year, said Mom was unstable and that I should stay quiet for my inheritance. And you believed him? I asked. My heart breaking. I wanted to believe I wasn't the reason she suffered. He sobbed. It was all coming together now. The manipulation, the forged signatures, the silence that had poisoned our family for decades. Victor had controlled every generation with shame and paperwork. But he didn't know I had the flash drive. Or that I'd already made copies. Multiple copies. I looked Eli in the eyes. Then it's time to end it, once and for all. Tomorrow, we reopen box 7. This time in court, he nodded. Wiping his face, I'll testify. I'll tell them everything, even about Dad's accident. I asked carefully. He looked away. Especially about that. The courtroom smelled faintly of cedar and tension. Victor sat at the defendant's table, confident, immaculate in his tailored suit. I stood with Naomi, who had agreed to testify alongside me. Eli sat in the gallery, pale but determined. The judge looked unimpressed as she shuffled papers. Mrs. Kessler, you claim this box contains evidence of fraud. Present it. The bailiff placed box 7 on the stand carefully. I took a deep breath and opened it myself this time. Inside, wrapped in aged ribbon, was the original contract, unburned. Intact, Victor's signature was clear. My mother's handwriting, shaky but deliberate. And one more signature that made the courtroom gasp. Eli's, that's impossible, Victor muttered, his composure finally cracking. I turned to the judge. It's not. It's proof he forged an heir's signature to gain full control of my family's estate, decades before Eli was even legally old enough to sign. Victor's jaw tightened, his hands gripped the table. Naomi whispered beside me, he's finished. But then my phone buzzed in my purse. A new email notification. I glanced at the screen and felt my heart stop. From Margaret Kessler, subject, the real box 7. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. Hands shaking, the email was still there. Impossible but real. I opened it with trembling fingers. The message was short, just a single line. If they've opened it, they've only seen the lie. The truth is in my lawyer's vault. Box 7B, my breath caught. There was another box. I drove through the rain to her old law firm that same night. The clerk looked startled when I gave him my name. Mrs. Kessler, we've been instructed to give this to you upon confirmation of your mother's passing. He led me to a small vault room and handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a key and a handwritten note. You'll know what to do with what you find. Don't destroy him, expose him. I turned the key in the secondary vault door. Inside was a metal box labeled evidence. 1991, estate fraud. Inside the box were 3 cassette tapes and a thin stack of printed transcripts. Each tape was dated. One had a name scrawled on the label in marker. Victor. Alden confession, unedited. I played it on an old recorder in the office. Victor's voice filled the small room. Younger but unmistakable. She'll sign it tomorrow. She thinks it's a trust for the kids. God forgive me, he laughed quietly. But she won't read the fine print. Once it's notarized, I'll own everything. Even her silence. My hands trembled violently. He'd confessed to it decades ago. He'd planned it all, but the last tape chilled me even more. It wasn't Victor's voice this time. It was my mother's. If Lorna ever finds this, tell her I did what I had to do to keep him from taking Eli. He said he'd prove Eli wasn't my husband's child, and he could. I froze when I realized the timestamp on the recording. The night before my father's accident. I returned home at dawn, exhausted and shaking. Naomi was waiting with coffee and deep concern in her eyes. You look like you've seen a ghost. I have, I whispered, and he's still alive. I played her the recordings. She listened in complete silence, tears gathering in her eyes. Lorna, this isn't just fraud, it's extortion. It's blackmail, maybe worse. We agreed to take it public, not through court, but through truth. Naomi's daughter worked as a journalist for a major news outlet. She agreed to help that afternoon. She aired the confession tapes across 3 different networks under the headline, Lawyer's Confession Ties Power Broker to 30-Year Cover-Up. Within hours, Victor's firm went dark. His clients pulled out, his partners resigned. His name was everywhere, and not in gold letters anymore. But before I could take a breath, Eli called. His voice was broken. Panicked, Lorna, he's gone, Victor's missing. The police found him 2 days later at his lake house. Alive but shattered, he'd left behind a letter addressed to me. Lorna, you think I stole your family. But your mother gave me everything, because she believed I was the only one strong enough to protect you from the truth. I never wanted her to die afraid of me. I wanted her to remember that I once loved her. I lost everything I touched, her. Eli, and now my name. You wanted justice. You've got it, but what will you do with it? I read it 3 times, he wasn't wrong. Justice always comes with a cost. And sometimes the cost is peace. I closed the letter, looked out at the lake, and whispered, "You protected us from the truth. But I'll protect it from dying with you." A month later, the court officially restored my mother's estate and her company's name. Kessler Innovations. Eli and I rebuilt the firm together, with Naomi as our legal partner. On the day I packed up my mother's things, I found one last small box, a jewelry box, tucked behind her vanity mirror. Inside was a ring, silver simple, engraved with 2 words, "Still yours." It wasn't addressed to my father. The size was wrong, it was meant for Victor. For the first time, I didn't feel hatred. Just grief, the kind that softens into understanding. I took the ring to the lake that evening and dropped it into the dark water. "It's over," I whispered. "You can rest now." As the ripples faded, my phone buzzed. A new message from Mom, subject proud of you. My wise girl, I smiled through my tears. For once, I didn't need to know how it was possible. I just believed. My mother had left me more than an inheritance. She'd left me the truth, and truths, no matter how painful, was the greatest gift of all. When she said, "Don't open box 7, she wasn't giving a command, she was giving me a choice. The choice to seek truth, even when it hurt. The choice to forgive, even when it seemed impossible. And I chose both, because that's what Kessler women do. We don't break, we outlast, and we always protect the truth. When my mother's will said don't open box #7, I thought it was a warning. I didn't know it was a map, leading straight to the truth she died protecting. In the end, I didn't just uncover lies. I uncovered love in its most painful form. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe, because every week, I share stories that remind us how truth, even buried, always finds its way back to light. Now I want to hear from you. What's the greatest betrayal you've ever faced, and what did it teach you? Share it in the comments below. I read every single one, and I promise I'll respond. This was my mother's secret. Now it's my story. My name is Lorna Kessler, and some boxes are meant to be opened.